Hello there, Jamie here, and it's the end of yet another year. And what better way to look over the past year than to look at the cinematic delights that we've had. There's been a few films this year that I haven't even seen yet, and I'm sorry if I missed any in this particular roundup, but I thought before we start the list it'd be good to look over some films this year that weren't that bad at all. We had the horror remake or prequel to The Evil Dead this springtime, which had plenty of amazingly gruesome moments for gorehounds and had a particularly exciting post-credits scene. I give it a year, a very funny British rom-com from one of the writers of Borat, which is particularly worth seeing for Stephen Merchant and Rafe Spall in his first starring role. The Last Stand, which features Arnie back to gloriously kicking arse mofo. Some great lines in this one. The Guilt Trip. Okay, so a lot of people didn't really like this one, but I personally quite liked it. It features Seth Rogen in quite a different role and Barbra Streisand, who's always a pleasure to watch. The perfect film for Mother's Day. A Late Quartet, worth seeing in particular for Christopher Walken, who completely steals the show with a very sweet performance. Great cast in general, including Catherine Keener and Philip Seymour Hoffman. Arguably the best Marvel film of the year, The Wolverine. I personally preferred this to Thor the Dark World and Iron Man 3, not only because of the great cheesy one-liners and how brave the film is to spend the majority of its running time focusing on Logan's angst rather than the usual blockbuster action, but also because it had possibly the most exciting post-credits scene of the year. The Conjuring, a bit of a forgettable film, but I do have a soft spot for James Wan, who directs, and while you're watching it, there is a genuine tension that fills the air. We also had a Steven Soderbergh double feature this year with Side Effects starring Rooney Mara and Jude Law, and Behind the Candelabra starring Michael Douglas and Matt Damon. Both pretty good. Captain Phillips, which is sure to gain loads of attention come awards season, worth seeing in particular for the last 10 minutes. Tom Hanks' performance is astounding. And then there were the films that came very close to making it into my top 10. The Heist, which was a surprisingly light-hearted comedy despite advertisements making it out to be a full-on action thriller. Starring Christopher Walken, William H. Macy and Morgan Freeman. Very funny moments and a genuinely gripping storyline that was technically released in 2009 but didn't make it to the UK until earlier this year. Marcia Gay Harding's also brilliant in it. A Field in England, which is a particularly unusual film featuring an incredible performance by the one and only Reece Shearsmith. Worth checking out for a certain slow motion shot towards the middle of the film, which is creepy as hell. The Blue Umbrella. The only reason this isn't in my top 10 is because it's a short film, so it technically doesn't count. Opening for Monsters University, it is a delightfully romantic and funny story with perfect animation. In the space of 10 minutes you really care for these umbrellas. Stoker, a really interesting, perfectly shot and unsettling film by Park Chan-wook. Featuring great performances by Mia Wasikowska, Nicole Kidman and Matthew Good, it'll have you thinking for hours after. Pretty good soundtrack too. Maniac, a very chilling and haunting film starring Elijah Wood as the titular character. Nora Arnezeder is also perfect in her role. It's ultimately a tragic story that leaves you feeling upset and very sympathetic for Wood's character, despite him being a murderer. Quartet, one of the first films of the year, coming out on New Year's Day this year, directed by Dustin Hoffman, and starring Billy Connolly, Tom Courtenay and Maggie Smith. A heartfelt and funny tale of growing older. Only God Forgives, perhaps the most atmospheric and mysterious film of the year. You'll need to persevere and have a lot of patience for it, but it's ultimately an incredibly well-made film with great performances all round. You'll be pondering for hours afterwards. The Great Gatsby, a particularly impressive film that is visually incredible, directed well by Baz Luhrmann and featuring great performances by Leonardo DiCaprio, Carey Mulligan and Tobey Maguire. Gravity, the most hyped up film of the year without a doubt. Great central performance by Sandra Bullock and you need to see it on the biggest screen possible. Alfonso Cuarón, you visionary beast. Filth, an incredible performance by James McAvoy and very funny moments including the Christmas party scene. Worth seeing also for Jim Broadbent and Eddie Marsan. Very tragic story overall. Don John, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's directorial debut, and what a brilliant one it is. Great performances all round, an interesting study of porn addiction, and ultimately a rather romantic story. And Blue Jasmine, Woody Allen's latest project, which features an incredible performance by Cate Blanchett, and indeed great performances all round. This one is Woody truly indulging the darkest and most neurotic side of his anxiety. Looking forward to the next one, Mr. Allen. Oh, Anyway, so now for the reason why we've all clicked on this video in the first place. Here's my top 10 films of 2013. Here's to 2013 and 2014. Cheers. A very strong contender for the most hilarious film of the year. Alan Partridge Alpha Papa has about 10 jokes every minute to the point where you're bound to miss a few on your first watch. It will please both newcomers to the character and die-hard fans of the television series. It's been a huge year for Steve Coogan, what with this and Philomena starring Judi Dench coming out recently, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what else he writes soon. You will definitely watch this again and again.
That's the officer, this, isn't it? Should snap my heels together here. Guten Tag. Silence! Sorry, I had to miss you.
This is The End. One of the most entertaining films of the year. Genuinely funny, and it's the perfect film to watch with your best buds. Visually, it's also very well done. There are a fair few sequences that are very tense while being funny at the same time, including when the apocalypse begins and a few chase sequences in the last half of the film. There's a lot of crude humour, which is to be expected here, just as a warning for the more sensitive of you out there. But when you put a bunch of guys locked up in a house for a long period of time, that kind of banter is bound to happen. And whereas these kind of laughs might not have worked in something like Funny People, directed by Judd Apatow a few years ago, it is very funny in this case. It's a great study of friendship put under pressure, and it comes with a very sweet and surprisingly poignant ending before a certain cameo from a certain band back in the day. Also an insanely good soundtrack. Django Unchained. Another installment by the legendary Quentin Tarantino, and how could it be anything less than brilliant? Jamie Foxx stars as Django, a man freed from slavery by a German bounty hunter named King Schultz, played by Christoph Waltz, and sets out to save his wife from a sadistic plantation owner named Calvin Candy, played by Leonardo DiCaprio. It's classic Tarantino dialogue. The script is truly well written and distinctively wonderfully detailed with witty vocabulary. No, I don't mean the constant use of the N-word, although the controversy surrounding its use in the film is pretty silly. The performances are all fantastic, of course, including a very underrated performance by Kerry Washington, who brings a lot of emotion to Django's wife. You root for her throughout. It may not be a masterpiece such as Pulp Fiction or Inglourious Basterds, but it's a damn good film.
Now you can get the Martian.
Possibly the biggest surprise of the year, Oz the Great and Powerful is a very worthy prequel to the classic Wizard of Oz. It follows the wizard in his early years, played fantastically by James Franco, who stumbles upon the world of Oz and meets a host of magical characters, including three witches played by Mila Kunis, Rachel Weisz and Michelle Williams. It is very well played, the animated characters such as the monkey voiced by Zach Braff and the China doll being particular highlights, as well as the live action characters. Franco is delightfully cheeky and does well to make the audience like his character despite him being quite selfish throughout the majority of the film. Michelle Williams is always a favourite as well. Sam Raimi's style was very clear here, with a lot of his trademark shots originating from The Evil Dead replicated here. Danny Elfman's music score is incredible and really adds to the world of Oz, making it feel quite Burton-esque at the same time. Visually amazing, Sam Raimi and Disney have produced another winner. It's surprising that Pixar's name isn't attached to this one. Wreck-It Ralph is a truly joyful and exciting film, animated beautifully and with characters you feel for and want to be around for long after the film finishes. Wreck-It Ralph, voiced by John C. Reilly, is a so-called bad guy character in the arcade game Fix-It Felix. He longs to be accepted and not to just be seen as his job occupation of being the bad guy anymore. He then goes on a journey to retrieve a medal to prove his heroic side, during which he meets a young girl called Vanellope, voiced splendidly by Sarah Silverman. The first game he enters on his journey is a first-person violent shooter. This sequence in the film is truly astounding and the soundtrack is awesome. This is just one of the many memorable scenes from this film. Very funny, wonderful story and an ending that makes you cry in a good way. Wreck-It Ralph is thoroughly recommended. It also featured an opening short film that was a feel-good delight. A ridiculously dark, doom-ridden and haunting film. Prisoners is the story of two young girls going missing one afternoon. The police find a suspect who is located near their last seen location, the suspect played stunningly by Paul Dano. The girls' fathers, played by Hugh Jackman and Terrence Howard, take the law into their own hands as the investigation goes slower than desired. Revealing much else about the plot will be giving it away. The story is filled with unexpected twists and turns and knockout performances. Hugh Jackman is a particular highlight. You really feel his anger, desperation and determination to find his daughter. The visual style is beautiful. Cinematographer Roger Deakins really projects the feelings of stress, anxiety and tension through the use of colouring and camera movement in every frame. Written and directed well also, Prisoners is a must-see. The Place Beyond the Pines. Ryan Gosling, Bradley Cooper and Eva Mendes star in Derek Cianfrance's latest film concerning matters of fathers and sons. Ryan Gosling plays Luke, a motorcycle stunt rider who suddenly discovers he has a baby boy with his ex-lover Romina, played by Eva Mendes. He turns to a life of crime and bank robbery to provide for them both, and with the hope they can become a normal, happy family. To reveal much else about the plot will be giving it away. Performances are spectacular. Gosling in particular has such a charisma on screen. He's a real classic movie actor. It is a beautifully observed study of fatherhood, guilt, right and wrong. Matt Lucas's first starring role in an American feature is certainly one to keep an eye out for. Small Apartments is the story of Franklin Franklin, a man who aspires to live in Switzerland and play the Alphorn. However, he finds himself stuck in a small apartment building with other fellow eccentrics. Oh, and he also accidentally kills his landlord, played by Peter Stormare, which attracts unwanted attention from the police. This is a deliciously dark comedy with an extraordinary cast including Johnny Knoxville, Juno Temple, James Caan, Amanda Plummer, James Marsden and Billy Crystal. Directed well by Jonas Åkerlund, known for directing videos for Rammstein and Lady Gaga, his style comes through also on feature film with vibrant colours and a certain taste for the macabre. Genuinely funny, sad and compelling character studies, including a very poignant moment between Knoxville and Temple's character towards the end of the film, really worth seeking out. The World's End. This had to be in the list. Filmed locally to us in Letchworth Garden City and Welwyn Garden City, The World's End is the story of 6 old friends reunited for one more pub crawl around the Golden Mile in their hometown, Newton Haven. Organised by Gary King, played by Simon Pegg, friendship issues are raised quite quickly around the time when the issue of the apocalypse comes to play, brought upon by an intergalactic invasion that has taken over the town. It's yet another brilliant film directed by Edgar Wright, finally reunited with the gang from Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz. Great cast also including Martin Freeman, Paddy Considine, Rosamund Pike and a hilarious Eddie Marsan, also with amazing cameos sure to please fans of the Cornetto trilogy and Spaced. The story is also spiked with melancholia with the theme of growing older and Gary King's backstory. Nostalgia is something every viewer can relate to, and this really connects the viewer with Gary King. Performance-wise, everything is perfect. Nick Frost is a particular highlight as Gary's best friend Andy Knightley. Not only is he very funny, but he's also a character that is frustrated beyond belief with Gary, and this is a very big shift from the usual dynamic Pegg and Frost have had before on screen. The action sequences are also choreographed incredibly. The concept of a pub crawl is highly entertaining, especially it being apocalyptic. Go and see it as soon as.
All before the last bittersweet pint in that most fateful terminus, the World's End. Leave a light on, good lady, for though we may return with a twinkle in our eyes, we will in truth be blind. Drunk!
As film critic Mark Kermode said on About Time, it's the cinematic equivalent of a great big warm hug. The story focuses on Tim, played by Domhnall Gleeson, who discovers on his 21st birthday that every male in his family, including his father, played by one of the coolest guys in the world, Bill Nighy, can time travel. After initial disbelief, he begins to use this to his advantage, as you would, and relive certain moments of his life that could have gone better. For any young man, this usually means a romantic situation. He meets Mary, played wonderfully by Rachel McAdams, and there he meets the love of his life, and so begins their story. Another romantically feel-good comedy by Richard Curtis, and what a spectacularly great one it is. It has something for everyone: romance, comedy, and even time travel for the science fiction fans out there. Again, like with any truly great story, there is also a slice of melancholy, as is the case with any story focusing on reliving the past. It's a film ultimately about sentiment, and the moral of the story is to live every day to the fullest. It sounds pretty corny when I say it, but Curtis writes the film so delicately that it doesn't feel corny or contrived. It makes you feel good to be a romantic, and restores your faith in the romance of life, just like any truly brilliant film should do.
Gandalf the Grey's pipe.
Yeah, no shit.
Hello, little hobbits. Spark my ganja.